Today we're talking about chapter 13, which is teamwork. Very important chapter, and I would encourage you guys to take good notes today, being as though you have 2 more group assignments to do. So first question, what is a team? How do you guys define a team? Anybody?
A group of people come together and work collectively as a whole.
So working collectively, what was your?
Carl?
Yeah. It's basically what you said.
That we all have the same goals and desires.
Same goals, all right. So according to the book, team is a group of people, with complementary skills who are committed to a common approach or a goal, like you said here, which they hold themselves mutually accountable. That means everybody's responsible for something, working together to achieve a common goal. So we know that there's different types of groups and teams that are formed. Some are going to be short term, some are going to be long term. And whether it's short or long is going to depend on what the tasks are, what the team has been gathered together to do. So these are a few different types of different teams. We have cross-functional teams. With the cross-functional teams, a good example of a cross-functional team might be team members from different departments. So cardiology department may work with surgical department. That would be considered a cross-functional team. Virtual team, we pretty much already know what that is. It's teams that are formed virtually. So there's American companies that have employees in different countries, and they may be organized on a team together, so those teams meet virtually. Have online classes that have group projects, and you think your projects are tough. They have to have virtual teams. They have to form teams with people that they may never see. Have students not just in North Carolina, have students overseas. So an example of virtual teams are the teams in my online classes. The task force is a special type of team. I'm sure you guys have probably, some of you may have heard of task force from being in military. And committee. Everybody knows what a committee is. You have committees at church and affinity groups, clubs that you're in. So these are a few different types of teams. Well, with every team, it's always a challenge. If we think specifically in terms of working in healthcare, one of the major challenges is that when we think in terms of our providers, our clinical providers, so our physicians and our nurses, unlike us as healthcare managers, they have not had a lot of formal training in teamwork, management, working together. So there's our challenge. We have us on one side, healthcare managers who have been trained in teamwork and working together, and then on the other side you have our providers who we have to work with but who have had no formal training. So imagine those 2 groups of people trying to work together for a common goal and having to come to an agreement on something. There's our challenge. So because of this challenge, it's important for at least us on our side as healthcare managers to realize how important teams are, how they should be formed, and how they should function. A lot of times you'll find that there'll be conflicts that happen between clinical providers and managers and healthcare managers because they just don't know how to work together. Clinical providers come to work to provide clinical services, to provide patient care. That's their expertise, that's their bread and butter, that's what they know. So a lot of times it'll cause conflict and issues because both sides just have different ways of doing things. And so we have to figure out ways to work together, because we have to work together regardless of what they know, what they don't know. So we as healthcare managers have a little bit more responsibility in trying to reel them in so that we can all work together. So why do we want to work together? What are the benefits? Well, there's a few different types of benefits of, keyword here, an effective team. One is we're going to improve quality of care. We're going to improve coordination of care. When we're all working together, we're all on the same page. We're probably going to have less medical errors. We're going to have better patient satisfaction. We're also going to be more efficient, meaning we're going to do things faster. We're going to do things more efficiently. We're going to do things less wasteful. if we're working together. If we're working together, we're obviously going to have higher job satisfaction. If we're able to work together peacefully, people are going to enjoy coming to work, working with other people, as opposed to dreading getting up every day to go to work with this person or these people. And when we think in terms of managers and what are the benefits from a manager view, here are a few of what we see when we see effective teams. We see improved communication. When teams are working together effectively, communication flows very freely. People are able to state their opinions and state their beliefs respectively. They're able to have people to actively listen to what they have to say and respond respectfully, so the communication is improved. Productivity. Again, if we're working together fine, we're being more productive. We're producing the things that we need to produce in a timely manner. We're not wasting time. We're not spending hours and hours on the same things. We're getting things done. We find that when teams work together, again, people want to come to work. So absenteeism decreases. You find that less people are calling out sick or not coming in because they want to be there. They want to work with their team, and which will ultimately also decrease turnover. So with almost everything in life, there's a cost. There's a cost of teamwork. So what are some of the costs? Well, everybody's going to lose some time. Time that you may have specifically dedicated to watch Wheel of Fortune every day, you may not be able to watch Wheel of Fortune every day because you may have to meet with your group or meet with your team. So that's an opportunity cost. Another cost, you may lose some autonomy. Maybe you're used to being in charge, and then for this particular situation or this particular group, your autonomy is lost. You're not in charge. So you have to work together and compromise. So there's a loss of autonomy in some examples. Similar to this, when you do step back and give up some of your autonomy, that's risky because you're basically giving other people control. So you're not controlling the entire situation, which we all know is risky. If we look at a direct example of the teams you have in here, the risk is your grade. If you loosen up the reins and give up some of your autonomy and some of your power, you're potentially risking what your grade might be because you're putting faith and confidence in your group and your team members. And another cost is just resistance to change. A lot of times we are used to things only being able to be done one way, and as a result, we don't always want to change. So that's another cost to working together in a group. Your book will discuss Tuckman, who goes into detail about different stages that occur within a group or team setting. And the first one is forming. So with the forming stage, this basically is the initiation of the group getting together. Everybody's just kind of getting to know each other. We're trying to figure out what the goals are. It's kind of beginning stage, very first beginning stage. Then the next stage is storming, and it's pretty much how it sounds. This is the stage where once you kind of get to know each other, you figure out where everybody's differences are. So there's going to be a little bit of conflict. So this is the stage or the area where you have a little bit of group conflict going on, differences in ideas and attitudes and behaviors. All of that kind of happens in this stage, which is storming. So then the next stage is performing. This is a stage where you kind of get over your conflicts, you kind of create that peaceful atmosphere, and you actually get down to working. So this is where you put in your work. Everybody puts in their own portion of work, and this is a stage where the work gets done, performing. And then the last stage is adjourning, and basically this is kind of where the ending stage of your group. So this is kind of where the project is closing up, you're finishing it up, and everybody's kind of just dispersing and breaking off and going back their respective ways. So those are the 4 stages within forming a team. So if you have a new team role, some of the questions, what do you think some of the questions are that you can ask when you're assigned to a team? Any team. What are some general questions that you should ask? And you can use your own groups as an example if you want.
When is the project due?
Okay, when is the project due?
What time is the meeting?
What time?
What time is?
Okay, what time are we meeting?
How do we want to divide up the work?
How do we want to divide up the work?
Where are we gonna meet?
Where are we gonna meet? All good. Goals. This should be one of the first conversations that you have. You have to first establish, why are we here? What is our goal? Our goal is to get an A. Our goal is to do this project so we can all get an A. So you always want to make sure you first establish the goals before anything else. We then need to know how are the goals going to be measured. So we know that our goal of finishing the presentation is going to be measured with a grade. What are some of the short and long-term deadlines? Somebody said, when is it due? Can't remember who. So that's important too. You want to, after you figure out what the goal is, you need to figure out the timing so you can kind of pace yourself and figure out how long it's going to take you to get to that goal or to the goals that you have. When and where do we meet? That was said also by, I think, a couple of you. This is important because these are things we have to establish up front so that we can figure out what's going to work for everybody's schedule, location, all those types of things. Now, this may not necessarily relate to your projects per se, but you also want to know who you're reporting to. That's important for several reasons. If something goes wrong, you're having issues, you want to know who's the report, who you're going to report to. Yeah.
Don't somebody need to be put like in charge to put it all together? You know what I'm saying?
Team leader?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where this question kind of includes that. So, in that stage, you probably want to pick a team leader, and then you also still want to know if you have issues above what a team leader can handle, where's the next step? So you're absolutely right. What is my role on the team? I think somebody kind of touched on that when they talked about how we're going to divide things up. So when you're dividing things up, that's when you're establishing what your part is, what's your important part on the team. And to go along with that, what are my responsibilities in the role? So these are all questions that you want to make sure that you ask when you're getting together with the team. So the way that you can recognize a good manager or someone that's overseeing the team is that a good manager or leader will not mind questions. They want questions. They want the team members to generate questions to make sure they're on the right track. So a good manager won't mind those questions. A good manager or leader is going to be coaching and mentoring throughout the whole entire process. So if I use myself as an example, it's my job, if I'm going to be a good manager or a good leader for you guys, to check in, to see how your groups are going. So when I'm asking you guys, how are your groups going, this is my attempt. I don't know how well it is, but this is my attempt at trying to make sure that I'm coaching and guiding you guys throughout the team process. And the last thing is that good managers will want good observations, new ideas, new perspectives from the team members. So a good manager or leader will make sure that they are pulling these things from the team and from the team members. So when you get to choose the team, does this person, these are things you want to look for when you're choosing your team, belong to an area that's affected by the problem at hand. So if we use a hospital as an example and we're trying to fix wait time, when we form the team together to try to tackle the issue of wait time, we probably want to have somebody from what department? Payroll?
Maybe admin for checking the patients, maybe there's a delay in getting their information.
Right. Registration or admin. You
Yeah.
definitely want to have at least one person that's checking these people in because they're probably directly affected to the issue. So when you're putting your team together, you want to make sure that you have key people on the team that are affected by the problem. Why? Because they're probably going to have good input. They probably already know why there's a wait time. So you want to make sure that you have them on your team. Are the people on your team knowledgeable? Do they have the skills that are needed to basically achieve the goals of the team? Does everybody have a clear, defined role on the team? Do your team members have the authority to make good decisions? And not just make good decisions, but also offer up suggestions and recommendations. So these are all things that when you're choosing your team, you want to make sure that you can put a check mark by each of these questions. Now, when you get to choose the team, we're still going, the people that you choose, can they follow up? Can they follow through? Are they going to do what they said that they're going to do? Are they going to have in their portion by 10 p.m.? You want to make sure that you can put a check right here. Can they meet deadlines? That kind of goes along with the first one. Can they think outside of the box? So can they think creatively? Or are they just kind of confined into their own little box and they can't think about anything outside of wherever their box is? Obviously, can they work collaboratively? When you're choosing members, you want to make sure that you pick people that you don't necessarily want to pick a team full of introverts. You probably want to pick some people that you know can actually work together with people and respectfully. Can your team members, when things do get out of hand, can your team members diffuse? Can they diffuse the tensions? Can they reduce the conflict? Does anybody on the team have a sense of humor? It's always kind of good to have at least one person, or try to have at least one person on your team that has a sense of humor. For situations when there is tension, you have somebody that can lighten up the mood. Do your team members have a good reputation for being a good team player? Or are you working with this person from family medicine that's always known to cause trouble on teams? Maybe not the person you want to pick. Do the team members value the ideas of everybody else and other people? And do they see, again, are they stepping outside of their box to see the greater, bigger organizational goals in addition to whatever the goals are for your team? EC is a thing that is also discussed in your book, and it basically deals with, or it describes how in tune someone is, how good they can read someone else. So sure, there's days that you guys come in and I can pretty much tell if you're having a good day or a bad day. That's basically my EC, or my ability to read each of you. They say that this is something that you can pick up within seconds, and they, unfortunately, guys, say that women are a little bit better at this than men. So why is this important? Because you want to try to have teammates that have the ability to pick up on other people's behaviors and personalities. Why? Because this may help with de-escalating any tension or conflicts that may be going on. How does EC relate to leadership? Well, again, obviously we can pretty much assume that a good leader is going to have a high level of EC, or be able to pick up on things very quickly. Now, we've oftentimes talked about healthcare and how in healthcare you have to work together a lot, which is one of the reasons you guys have group projects in here. But I kind of want to just reiterate it. It reminds you that in a healthcare environment, you are in what is called a participative work climate. What that means is everybody has to participate. If we're trying to save a life, or we're trying to implement some type of service or patient care, it's not usually something one person can do. It's usually something that everybody has to join in and pitch in and participate in. So specifically in healthcare, it's important to note that it's unavoidable. At some point, regardless of what you're doing, I don't care if you sit at a computer all day, every day, you're going to be working with other people. You're going to be working in teams. So it's important to know, to just get it in your mind that if I'm working in healthcare, I'm going to be in a participative environment. So knowing that every day when you get up and go to work, if you don't like people, you may need to consider what you're doing, because this participative work climate won't go away. It's always going to be something that is in a healthcare environment. So there were a few researchers that found some specific things that were common on effective teams. And here are a few of them. They found, number one, that effective teams, and again, we all know what effective teams are. These are teams that are successful, that work together well. They work with more information. So again, some of that's going to require you possibly to step outside of that box, to get more information, to be a little bit more innovative, to be creative. But those successful teams are the ones that have more information. How do we get more information? More than likely, we have everybody participating. The more people participate, the more information we're going to have. They also found that effective teams will develop several different options. They'll develop multiple alternatives. So, if we go one path, effective teams will also have kind of different scenarios or different backups in case the first path that they go down does not work. They found that effective teams have common goals. So there's not, two members over here with one goal and two members over here with one goal. Everybody in an effective team has one or two common goals. They found that effective teams, some type of way, try to insert humor into whatever it is they're doing. So effective teams are the ones you'll find that are laughing, that are enjoying themselves, having fun, working together, as opposed to a group that's very cold, not warm, not jovial, things like that. They also found that effective teams are able to have a balance of power. So there may not necessarily just be one person in charge calling all the shots, but the power is more so balanced between everybody in the group. Sure, there may still be a leader, but at the same time, that leader isn't overbearing and the group is still able to somewhat have a balance of power. And the last thing that they found in effective teams is that they focused on the facts. And this is very important because this is a skill that, especially for teams and managers, that sometimes is not done. What they mean is, if you're working with a team and something isn't right, the way that you focus on the facts is you say, this word is misspelled. You don't say you can't spell. Once I say you can't spell, I've made it personal. Why? Because I said you. Instead of just saying, there's some misspelled words in the project, or I think this word is misspelled. That's a fact. Me saying you can't spell is personal. An effective team knows the difference. An effective manager knows the difference, which will be very important when you're talking to people. Again, it's always important to focus on the facts. Keep the personal out of it, because the minute you say you or you make it personal, then that's when the conflicts start to happen. That's when the tensions start to rise. So it's very important. This might be one of the most important ones in this list, in my opinion, is that you always want to focus on the facts. Crew resource management. Does anybody know what that is? Crew resource management is fairly new to the healthcare industry. It's basically something that was developed in the airline industry. We all know that flying planes is very dangerous. Lots and lots of planes fly in the air every day. So we know that they have to have basically great teamwork, because again, they're flying in the air every day, they're transporting hundreds and hundreds of people. So they really have no room for error, they have no room for conflict. Everybody has to be on board. And so what has happened is the healthcare industry has started to adopt this type of management because they saw that it was successful in the airline industry. And while in healthcare, we're not flying in planes, we're still dealing with lives. So it's somewhat similar. So basically, again, within the healthcare industry, they've started to apply crew resource management into working with teams with hopes that it will help teams be more effective. So once we have our team together, there's a few different how-tos that we'll need to have. If we're the team leader, we gotta make sure we ask for ideas. Not just once, it has to be something that we continue to do throughout the entire process. Not only do we wanna ask for ideas, we also wanna make sure that we're actually acknowledging what people are saying. We don't wanna just say, what do you think? And then give me a response. And your response?
I think
It's
it's
good.
good.
It's
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
Word, and then you cut him off. You cut him off. Have you really acknowledged what he said?
No.
You ask him a question to make him feel good, and then you cut him off. So you don't want to just ask questions or ask for ideas. You also want to acknowledge what they're actually saying. You want to write it down, make notes. You don't want to interrupt. You want to let that person get out their thoughts without interrupting them, because why? That's the respectful thing to do. And not only do you not want to interrupt, you want to make sure, again, as the leader, that no one else is interrupting. So if you find that someone else is interrupting, as a leader, that's when you should step in and say, just let it finish. Most teams will have a critic, or you may say it may not be a critic or a devil's advocate. You want to make sure that you ask them for suggestions. Why? Because if you don't, they are going to be more likely to interrupt. So you want to make sure that you always ask the critics for their suggestions, because if you don't, they're going to find a way to criticize what everybody else is saying. So you always want to include your critics or a devil's advocate, however you want to come. And as a leader, you got to stay calm. You could be totally angry, totally frustrated, but you're the leader. Everybody's looking for you to lead. So it's very important that you always remain calm. Team members, you have responsibilities too. You need to take whatever it is that you're supposed to do and follow through. Don't just take your part and feel like, well, as long as I get it in by the due date, I'm fine. No, if you guys have set a deadline before, 2 days before the due date, as a team member, it's your job to still follow through and make sure that you meet all the deadlines. What are some critical elements? Well, one, summary of the meeting. Every time you guys meet, it's a good idea after you meet to have a summary of what was done. It could be a brief email that you send out to everybody that says, this is just to summarize what happened today. We discussed team member A doing this. We discussed team member B doing this. We discussed everybody submitting their stuff by Friday at 12 p.m. Why do we do that? Just in case somebody missed something, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, communicating. So it's always good to send out a summary of your meeting after you meet. And this more than likely is going to be done by the team leader. What are other critical elements? And this one is for everybody. Follow up. Follow up and follow through. Does everybody know the difference between follow up and follow through? Just follow up.
Follow up is like checking in with your team members after the meeting, make sure that they understand what their portion is, and if they have any questions or need any assistance.
All right, so yes, that's follow up. So then what is follow through?
Going through what was assigned to
Exactly,
you.
actually doing what you're supposed to do. So both of these are very critical. So you want to make sure each team member is doing both of these. Now, by now you guys know, you've already been through one group project, that you're going to have conflict. It's inevitable. All teams have conflicts, even the effective ones. So now that we know that, we all are going to have conflict. Next, we need to figure out how we manage it. So here are a few different types of conflict management methods that you can do. So the first one is bargaining. Everybody know what bargaining is? Bargaining might be, bargaining might be, if you hate doing peer-reviewed articles, you tell him, if you do my peer-reviewed article, I'll do 2 extra slides. That's bargaining. Or if there's a conflict about the color of the PowerPoint, you say, fine, you know, you can do blue, you know, if you let me use white ink or white font or whatever. That's bargaining. Voting, everybody knows what voting is, so if there's a conflict, let's vote, and majority wins. Problem solving. This one requires a little bit more work. If there's conflict going on, you want to try to get to the root of the problem, and then once you figure out what that is, figure out how to solve it. So that one requires a little bit more work, a little bit more collaboration on everybody's part. Research. If we think that 12 slides is okay, instead of having conflict about it, let's just research. Let's look in Blackboard, or let's email the instructor and find out what it is instead of spending time fighting about it. And third-party mediation. I guess that's where I would step in. If you guys are having a conflict and you can't seem to solve it, then the last option is third-party mediation. So a third party will obviously be somebody outside of the group that doesn't really have a bias or an allegiance to anybody, that's going to be totally objective, that you can talk to assist you with some type of mediation. So these are all different types of ways that you can manage your conflict. You may end up using more than one of these. You may end up using all of these. But these are all good ways to try to get through whatever conflict it is that you may have as a team. That's pretty much the end of our presentation today. Does anybody have any questions about what we talked about today? Comments?